Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again. It is Syracuse basketball postgame presented by Krause Health, Brent Axe, Mike Curtis, syracuse.com. And we're coming off the heels of a bubble burst, perhaps, for Syracuse basketball as they lose to Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Final score of 84-77. And Mike, it was certainly a tale of points in the paint. Georgia Tech absolutely throttled Syracuse in the paint. Moses Wright mostly, but Usher scoring inside as well. Georgia Tech just had its way with Syracuse's 2-3 zone all day. Wright ends up on the day with 31 points and 16 rebounds, and Syracuse was just helpless to stop that. And if you can't stop Georgia Tech from scoring in the paint, it's going to be hard to catch up otherwise. And that's what happened to the Orange today. They actually got off to another slow start, crawled out of that slow start, led at halftime, but Georgia Tech put up 50 points in the second half because Moses Wright and Usher just had a clear lane. Let us pull the velvet rope away, and to the basket you go, sir.
Yeah, it was definitely a train wreck, especially on the inside. And Syracuse couldn't do nothing with Wright. I mean, it seemed like every play they were getting it to him on the high post, to the low block, and he would just go to work. I don't know how many dunks he had, but I think he had at least 7 or 8.
At least. It felt like that, right? There was at one point the announcers, our good friend Anish Shroff, Syracuse grad, was like, how many dunks does Wright have? And my instinct was like, I don't know, 20? He just dunked all game long. And that's been the story these past few games, Mike. If it was Duke, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, if you got a big man, you're going to feed him the ball early and often because Syracuse just doesn't have the interior defense. And this one started off today. Marek Dolezaj had 2 fouls before, you could even take your first sip of your beverage watching this game. A rare bad game for him. So he's in foul trouble. Jesse Edwards, actually, I thought did pretty well for the most part for a guy who hasn't played that often to come in and hold his own. We'll go over some numbers here shortly. Alan Griffin at one point had 20 of Syracuse's, I think, 29 points. He scored 20 at halftime. And just imagine if some other guys had come along for the ride in that first half. But he put Syracuse on his back. He had a great bounce-back game there. Quincy Guerrier struggled again in the first half, a much better second half for him. So, Mike, this wasn't a typical slow start for Syracuse, but it was another slow start. It's just one of those things. This team, for whatever reason, just can't come out of the gate strong.
Yeah, and they were really beat up on the inside. Like you mentioned, once Marek picked up that second foul, Jim Boeheim got a tech early on. I think from that moment, we kind of saw how this game was going to go. They just had no answer for Georgia Tech on the inside. And it's funny because you mentioned that Alan Griffin, he scored 20 points at half. And then right after Dolezaj picked up his 4th foul there in the second half, he took himself out.
Yeah.
That was kind of odd. We saw Pete Moore kind of tweet that out because even the announcers thought that he didn't start the second half. He actually did. He just took himself out really quickly.
You know what, Mike? I don't want to speculate here, but he did that a couple games ago too. He's done that a couple times. I don't know if he's got a stomach issue or something. He's got to run into the locker room and come back out. But Griff's done that a couple times this year, and it was right at the beginning. You mentioned it. I initially thought he didn't even start the second half. He actually did, but took himself out very quickly. So I don't know if something's going on with him health-wise there. He did come back in and play. He only played 13 minutes total in the second half, though. And I think a lot of that had to do with defense. Jim Boeheim mentioned it at his press conference afterwards. I mean, the whole team played bad on defense. Let's not get crazy here. But particularly, the forwards down low, nobody could stop Wright or Usher, or even DeVoe got in there a couple of times. Alvarado had a terrific game for Georgia Tech, as we'll get into. But let's go over some numbers here briefly, Mike, and then we'll respond to some of your comments. Thanks for watching today, wherever you are out there in internet land today. So the big thing was in the interior. We mentioned it. Rebounding-wise, Georgia Tech beat Syracuse 41-36. Syracuse is now that number presents itself again when they out-rebound another team. They're 12-0. They're now 1-8 when they don't on the season. Shooting-wise, Georgia Tech in this game shot a clean 50%, 33 of 66. They scored 50 points in the second half, as we mentioned. Neither team was really hitting from the outside. Georgia Tech was 5 of 19. Syracuse was 7 of 21 there. Points off turnovers. Both teams actually converted here. Georgia Tech got 28 points. Syracuse got 23 there. But it's points in the paint that tell the story. Georgia Tech 54 and Syracuse 24. We mentioned Usher with 31 and 16, or pardon me, Wright with 31 and 16. Usher had 19 points on the day. DeVoe with 18 points, hit a couple of threes, but a 7 of 16 overall. Alvarado, Mike, didn't really light up the box score, but he was important because the biggest thing he did today, he had 6 assists on the day, eventually fouled out, but he shut down Buddy Boeheim on defense.
Yeah, Buddy had a bad time shooting the ball today. There were often times where he didn't even get a chance to get the ball. That's how much Alvarado was kind of pestering him on offense. And like you said, this team needed an inside presence. I know Boeheim tried to cycle through his centers. He had John Bolajak in there at one point. Jesse Edwards probably had the best game of his career, but it came when Syracuse needed him to play. So he had 7 points, eight rebounds. He had a really good block there. I think it was in the first half where he just
terrific. On Wright, by the way. Yeah. I think he just needs to put on a couple more pounds, a little bit more experience. He'll be ready to go. But Boeheim said these guys aren't playing well in practice, so that's why they're not getting a chance to get that in-game experience. He also revealed after the game, Mike, that his plan this year was to redshirt Jesse Edwards. Barama Sidibe goes down in the first game. There's your center who's out. And remember, Barama had a terrific finish to last season. He averaged a double-double in his last 6-7 games. Looked like he was rounding into the player we all expected when healthy, and then the kid just can't shake the injury issues, unfortunately. So Jesse was supposed to redshirt. He said John Bull was recruited as a forward and just not cutting it at center. Frank Anselm is actually a year ahead of schedule. He should still be in high school, but came in early. So you got a lot of projects at that center position, which results, of course, in Marek playing center a lot this year. And today, certainly not his day. And he's overwhelmed against the Moses Wrights of the world and the Mark Williams of the world. And North Carolina's coming Monday. We'll get into that shortly. But just to give you a couple Syracuse numbers, Alan Griffin ended up with 26 points on the day. He had 20 at halftime. As we mentioned, Quincy Guerrier get it going in the second half. Not much there in the first half for him, but 13 points on the day. Joe Girard ends up with 10 points. That's something out of Joe. He didn't hit any threes, which you really need him to, but he didn't even score against Duke. So a bit of a step forward for him. We mentioned Boeheim. He ended up with 12 points on the day, but that all came late, and Alvarado just owned him throughout the day. Kadari Richmond struggled, Mike. I mean, that eternal discussion of who should be in the backcourt. Got to the basket 5 times, couldn't make any of those. And you mentioned the great game from Edwards with 7 points and 8 rebounds. So quick turnaround to the Tar Heels, Mike. And just to go back and look at that one, remember, it was a back-and-forth game between Syracuse and Carolina the first time around, but here's the key numbers from that one. Tar Heels out-rebound Syracuse 48-30, including 24-10 on the offensive glass. UNC a 24-4 mark in second-chance points, and the Tar Heels outscored Syracuse 42-24 in the paint. Looking at today's mark in the paint as well, this is not adding up well for Syracuse to take advantage of its next 2 games because Clemson follows after that, which will complete 3 games in 5 days. And we saw how they beat up Syracuse in the paint in that first matchup. So you're now 0-6 in quad 1 games if you're Syracuse. And I think they're kind of at that miracle stage if they're going to make the tournament at this point.
Yeah, at this point, I think you just got to win out. You got to win the rest of your regular season games, and you got to win the ACC tournament, which won't be an easy task at all. I was just in the post-game presser, and Josh Pastner, Georgia Tech coach, was asked if his team should make the tournament, and he gave a really lengthy explanation of why. But I asked him, you said a lot of ACC teams should make it as well. Is Syracuse one of those? And he said absolutely, it's a no-brainer. Jim Boeheim's a Hall of Fame coach. They have really great players. Not sure what the rest of the committee will think, but we'll see.
Josh, Syracuse is not a no-brainer. I'm sorry. Now, I agree his team should be in. They've beaten 4 ranked teams this year. One of those was Kentucky, but Kentucky's kind of rounded out back into form. They could win the SEC tournament. They've got some quad 1 opportunities. Syracuse has not. Their best win is Virginia Tech, and that's not enough to get them in. They're 0-6 in quad 1 today would have helped their cause. Josh Pastner earlier this week on Packer and Durham said 11 ACC teams should be in. I appreciate his enthusiasm. He's a really positive guy. I was talking to a friend of mine, Ken Segura, who covers Georgia Tech for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on the radio yesterday. And we had a discussion about the eternal optimist. Every glass is half full with Pastner, and I appreciate that. But no, this team's not a no-brainer in the tournament by any stretch of the imagination. They're bubble pop today, Mike. You said it. They got to win out and do some serious damage in the ACC tournament, I think, to get at this point. All right, let's hop in the comments here. Appreciate everybody joining us on this Saturday afternoon. I'll tell you what, do what you got to do on this Saturday, but get back to a TV at 6 o'clock. Syracuse, Virginia, even if you're not a big lacrosse fan, these games are typically back and forth, high scoring, really entertaining. So check that out later. Just a lot of frustration, as you can imagine, Mike. I see some thumbs down emojis here, but Elena noting how good Jesse played in this game. Iris saying the same thing. Dave noting for all the good this year, Richmond did not play well today. He missed a lot of chippies. And that's a good point, Mike. I think we've kind of gotten to this narrative, if you will, that Kadari Richmond's just going to come in and save the day. And, Joe Girard, though, is at the point. It's kind of like that Godfather 3 line. Just when you think you're out, he pulls you back in and will show what he's capable of. But both Kadari and Joe not really on the mark today. And Buddy, not on the mark either. The backcourt itself did not have a solid game.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Girard and Kadari, they both have aspects of their game that the other can't do. Kadari's really good at attacking his defender with his dribble moves. He dropped someone today and was able to find Frank Edwards for a dunk. Jesse Edwards for a dunk. And he's really good at that. He can find his teammates at the rim. And he typically does a good job of finishing at the rim too, but today he just couldn't get all 5 of his shots to go. And then with Girard, if his shot's not going, he's pretty much ineffective out there. But he was able to get some mid-range buckets to go, but he has to do more.
Blake, I like this line from the comments. Moses Wright looked like Moses Malone against Syracuse today. I might have to use that in my column, Blake. I'll give you a shout out if I do. Dave says, whatever happened to the good old days when if you tried to dunk on us, you paid the price. Today's dunk fest was mostly uncontested. And there has been a run in recent years, Mike, where Syracuse has truly lacked that big man in the middle. The last one they really had was Rakeem Christmas. I love Bai Musa Keita. I think there's been moments from Barama before he got hurt. You go back to that last team that we really felt like, could win a national championship. And that was in 2012. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. 2010, one of those years when Arenziano Waku got hurt in the Big East tournament against Georgetown. I mean, that just took the air out of the sail for that team. It still made an Elite Eight run in 2012. But I think of those names, right? And they just haven't been there for this team in recent years. There's just been some misfires in recruiting. There's been some players they've missed out on. We mentioned why the center position has gotten to the point it has now. Fab Melo was good there for a couple of years, but they just haven't had that reliable, just bang inside center really since Rakeem Christmas. And that was a team that was not going to make the tournament in 2015. They took themselves out of the tournament. So, Mike, you've been writing about recruiting. We've mentioned it a couple of times, but there's a couple names that Syracuse is going hard after in the class of 2022 that could certainly help this problem, but that's still a couple of years away from that player getting on the court.
Yeah, Brandley Huntley Hatfield is one of those players. He's the number one power forward in that class. And like you said, it is a couple years away. I saw a couple tweets after the game that said Syracuse might want to test the transfer portal for next year. To kind of go get that big that they need.
They really should.
Yeah, depending on what Barama Sidibe does and Marek Dolezaj, they could opt to leave after this year and not take advantage of that extra year at the NCAA is granting.
That's a good point, Mike. And our colleague Mike Waters and Donna Datota talked to Marek Dolezaj and Barama Sidibe respectively this week. You're going to see those stories come out in full next week ahead of Senior Day. Neither one of them committed to coming back. Neither one of them committed to fully leaving. They think it's something they'll address after the season. They both want to talk to Coach Boeheim and move on, but I'm anticipating both will move on in some way, shape, or form. But the option is there for Barama to come back if he chooses. Even if he does, They do have to find someone in the transfer portal. Pardon me. They got to shore up that position going forward here. Merritt says, who cares if we're recruiting 5 and 4 stars? Boeheim is sitting Woody Newton at this point, who was a top 100 player. Yeah, the mystery goes on of did he even travel to the game? I don't even know if he was there.
Yeah, I saw him sitting on the bench. He was just sitting there shaking and dapping up his teammates. But it's funny because I see Woody Newton more on Instagram than I see him on the court.
That's a good way to put it. Unfortunately, he has just not made the rotation in one way, shape, or form at this point. Let's see. Tawan says, let them both go. Blake says, what's the status of Dior Johnson at this point? Blake, I don't think he's going to play at college. I think he backed out of his commitment to Syracuse. I think by the time he has to make a decision, and I don't want to speak for him, certainly, the one and done rule will be gone and he'll be able to go to the NBA. So my prediction, I don't know if you agree, Mike, I don't think we're going to see Dior Johnson play college basketball at all.
Yeah, when he first committed to Syracuse, a lot of people had questions. They didn't even think that he'd make it to campus, and they were right because he decommitted a little bit before Christmas. And it's interesting because he transferred from school to school, and he talked to Mike Waters about it and said a lot of people don't know why he transferred, and he wouldn't even elaborate as to why. He just said there was like some internal stuff that no one really knew about. So it's interesting. I'm not sure what he's up to these days, but we're gonna have to see it play out.
And Syracuse has been in an interesting position there because he would be the highest rated recruit since Carmelo Anthony. I believe that Hatley Hunfield fits the same description if he commits. They had Darius Baisley a couple years ago, 5-star player who ended up in the NBA, but same situation. He didn't end up playing in college at all. So per Merritt's comment about does it matter if you're getting 5 and 4-star commits if A, they don't even show up, or B, in Woody Newton's case, top 100 player, they're not even getting out there. It just shows you the inexact science that recruiting is at this point, Mike. And on a different note, I see a few of you kind of commenting about the tournament and the final record's going to be. Look, frankly, I don't think this team deserves to play in the tournament if that's how they're going to play. Like the best teams that Syracuse has had in the tournament, look at the last 3. 2013, 2016, 2018. 2 of those years were Final Four runs. 2016, they barely got in the tournament, made a Final Four run. 2018, they barely got in the tournament and made a Sweet 16 run. 2013 was a really good, solid team. The common denominator there, all 3 of those teams were top 20 defensive efficiency teams, according to Ken Pomeroy's numbers. If you don't like analytics, let me just put it to you bluntly. They were really good defensive teams. This is a really poor defensive team. So even if they get in the tournament, what are they going to do? I mean, it's all about matchups, right? But that's what carries Syracuse through in those deep tournament runs. This does not look to me of a team that is playing with desperation, is playing with I'm not saying they don't play hard. They do. But look at Georgia Tech play. Look at Duke play on Monday. Those are teams that can smell it, that can see it, and there's just a certain extra gear that they have that Syracuse just doesn't at this point. So I don't think Syracuse has shown they deserve to play in the tournament, even if they somehow make it.
Yeah, it's a clear difference between a team that wants to make the NCAA tournament and a team that's kind of just going through the motions in hopes that they make it. And you saw that with Georgia Tech today. I mean, they had a sequence where they had back-to-back dunks. Wright had one of them, and I forgot who had the other. But as soon as that happened, their bench went nuts, and you could tell that they really wanted it. Moses said after the game in the presser that if they wanted to go to the dance, they had to make that run. So that's the team that really wants it, and that's the team that the rest of the NCAA should be on the lookout for.
By the way, they have not made the tournament. I couldn't believe it when I heard it this week. Since 2010, this is their first time they've had back-to-back ACC road wins. Going into this game today, they were at home today, since 2008. And Josh Pastner noted another thing. He probably talked about it on the presser, Mike. Yeah. He pointed out first time since 1989-90 that Georgia Tech has had consecutive winning records in the ACC.
Yeah. Yeah, he wanted all the reporters to tweet that stat out because it was.
I don't blame him. You know, you got to make your case to the committee at this point that they deserve to be there. And the thing with Georgia Tech, Mike, is a lot of seniors, a lot of juniors, a lot of experience. It showed today. They want to play in the tournament, and they're playing like a team that wants it.
What do you think about the NIT? I see Bill right here saying they shouldn't even play in the NIT. Just pack it.
Bill, I agree with you. Just decline. Just like, no thanks. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm surprised they're even doing the NIT this year. God bless them for doing it. I think it's all in New York, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're doing a similar bubble situation like the NCAA tournament is, but don't even bother. They won't. They'll accept the bid and they'll play. But if I was in charge, I'd be like, thanks, but no thanks. I just that doesn't sit right. So that brings up a question: what's worse, to be an NIT team and turn down the bid, or be a team that maybe at one point looked like a tournament team but slips itself into the NIT? The recent Syracuse NIT team in 2017 should have been an NCAA tournament team. That was bogus that team even had to go to the NIT. Syracuse made the Sweet 16 the year after that. 2019, Mike, they got in the tournament comfortably, but fell to that 8-9 game against Baylor, who now is one of the best teams in the country, and bowed out. And then, of course, there wasn't a tournament last year, but I don't think they would have made it last year, though. Man, when they beat North Carolina in the ACC tournament, I don't know. They looked like they were ready to make a run and be another one of those Syracuse teams that said, hey, we're here again.
We're going to see how this all plays out. They got North Carolina on Monday. And I remember from that game, it was Leaky Black who pretty much put a real mean defensive job on Buddy Boeheim. So we'll have to see how that plays out in the next game.
Yeah, we brought up the numbers earlier. Carolina has always been a matchup issue for Syracuse. They're great inside. If the Orange are going to be competitive in that one, it is at home. It's going to have to be similar to the first North Carolina game in that it's an up and down scoring thing, but you brought it up. Leaky Black was terrific on Buddy Boeheim. You're going to need all hands on deck offensively to win that game because, as Jim Boeheim even noted in his presser, you can't count on defense to make stops, and this is just not a good defensive team. So, Mike, at 1-10 in their last 11 against the Heels. Thank you, Jim, for putting that stat in there, and that is correct. I think we'll end on that note. Mike, we'll be right back at it Monday night as Syracuse takes on North Carolina. Look for Mike's coverage of Syracuse women's basketball as well. They've got an important game against NC State on Sunday. Busy weekend all around for SU Athletics. The women's lacrosse team dominates Stony Brook today, even without their best player, Emily Harris. Chuck, we hope she's okay, by the way. She's got a lower body injury that we don't know the details of yet. As we're talking here, this game has not been played. If you're watching later on YouTube, you might know the results, but Syracuse, Virginia, great lacrosse game coming up. And then, as mentioned, Syracuse women's basketball tomorrow, Syracuse men's hoops on Monday, Wednesday. It's going to be a busy stretch here, Mike, and we'll have everybody covered.
Always the best time of the year when it gets close to March. That March Madness feeling just energizes us all.
But it doesn't look like Syracuse will be a part of it, at least right now. We'll see what happens. Thanks to Krause Health. Thanks to everybody for watching out there. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Mike and I will be back Monday night after the Orange take on the Tar Heels.